This is one of a series of good answers presentations, offering evidence to answer skeptical challenges to the Bible's accuracy. Today we look at Part 2 regarding the Exodus from Egypt. A minute or so to review will probably be helpful. Was the Exodus historical, or only a legend, the product of a people's collective imagination? Much of the scholarly world, we saw, believes it is only a legend. Recall this quote, summarizing the general opinion of historians. This sentiment is repeated again and again. If you are looking for evidence of Israelites in Egypt and the desert, you will find no evidence in archaeology. We asked in the earlier lecture, though, what kind of evidence we could expect to find. First of all, would the Egyptians tell about the Exodus? Despite their habit of inscribing records of events on great monuments, we find that these always trumpet their successes. They never record their failures. Some battles they actually lost are recorded as victories. And there was much about the Exodus they would prefer to forget. A Pharaoh ordering the slaughter of helpless Hebrew infants, a Hebrew named Moses, raised as a prince in a royal family, only to turn renegade, 10 plagues inflicted on the Egyptians by the god of Hebrew slaves, the weakness of a Pharaoh, refusing to let the slaves go, then agreeing to it, then refusing again in an agony of indecision, and the disaster at the Red Sea, with the loss of the Egyptian chariot host. No matter how much we uncover, we're not likely to find an Egyptian record of all that. But on the other hand, it's fair to ask, could the Egyptians really hide an event so huge, so damaging to themselves, their resources, and their morale? It would be like this little fellow, trying to hide what he's been up to. What have we learned so far? Manfred Betak's discovery of the city of Avaris Perinefer Ramesses, with its palaces, has shown that there was a store city called Ramesses in the right place to match the biblical narrative. So, too, there was a royal palace complex there, and all of it built at the right time, shortly before Moses' birth. It would have been the scene of both his early life and his confrontations with Pharaoh. And Betak concluded that the palace and city were abandoned shortly after the traditional date of the Exodus, just as the Egyptians might have done, to try to escape the memory of the disasters that they suffered there. So far, so good. Now let's review a bit of Egyptian history, this time in more detail. The Hyksos period, from the 1800s down to 1550 BC or so, saw 2 Egypts, one in the Nile Delta region, ruled by the Semitic Hyksos people, but calling themselves Egyptians, and one in the south, where the native Egyptians held out. After many attempts, the Egyptians under Pharaoh Ahmose I succeeded in driving out the Hyksos. Coming back into control of the Delta again, where the Hebrews lived and thrived, the Egyptians may well have taken this occasion to reduce them to slavery. Soon afterward, around 1526, Moses is born, and the events are set in motion that will lead to the Exodus. But before we go there, let's see just what happens after the Hyksos are expelled from northern Egypt. Back in control of the Delta region, the Egyptians take several major initiatives. They establish a military garrison in the Delta. They build the store city of Ramesses and make it a third capital city, with a palace complex for the pharaoh. Now the pharaoh can have a presence in the north and military force to protect him. They also built a line of forts running from the Mediterranean Sea down to the Gulf of Suez. The purpose of all this is quite clear. After the humiliation of being deprived of half their country for 3 centuries, they are determined that it will never happen again. If the Hyksos, or anyone else, should try to move against them, they will be prepared. And they go farther. Using their renewed military strength, they move east and north to establish control of Canaan. With Egyptian governors and military garrisons in the major cities, they will have a substantial buffer zone against any possible future invasion. In his book, The Defendable Faith, archaeologist Stephen Collins describes this period. The kings of the early to mid-18th dynasty, Ahmosis I, Amenhotep I, Thutmose I and II, Hatshepsut, and Thutmose III, all pursued a vigorous policy of domination over the Nile Delta region and the subjugation of the area's Semitic population. They also began to exercise hegemony over Canaan and Syria, obviously to prevent the recurrence of a Hyksos-like invasion. Egypt's eastern border was secured by walls, blockades, and fortresses from the Red Sea, or Gulf of Suez, to the Mediterranean. That's a modern historian's summary. But how do we know all this? Here the answer is easy. The pharaohs themselves tell us about it. It's one of their glory periods. But then something remarkable happens. After more than 100 years of expansionist policy, pursued by every pharaoh in that period, Egypt in the late 1400s begins to lose Canaan. Little by little, the territory they had fought so hard to win and hold slips away. But they don't lose it in war. They fritter it away. Professor Collins tells about the pharaoh who presided over that loss. Self-indulgent and surrounded by riches, Amenhotep III ruled for 38 years. But all the while, Egypt's control over Canaan and Syria dwindled to nothing. By the time of Amenhotep III's death and the ascension of Amenhotep IV, or Akhenaten, to the throne of Egypt, the beginning of the end was well underway for the once great 18th dynasty. Anyone may wonder how we know this, but our knowledge is based on Egyptian records. Not some huge statue with an inscription, though. The evidence is found in the so-called Amarna tablets. These are clay tablets, some 350 of them, recording official correspondence between the pharaoh and various rulers and governors. They cover the late 1400s and 1300s BC, the period following the traditional date of the Exodus. And in them we can see Canaan slipping away from Egypt's grasp. Here is a sample. Rib-Adi says to his lord, the king of lands, the great king, the king of battle. That's how you address the pharaoh if you want to stay on his good side. Let my lord listen to the words of his servant, and let him send me a garrison to defend the city of the king, until the archers come out. And if there are no archers, then all the lands will unite with the Apiru. Here is another example, tablet EA 298. Let the king, my lord, be aware that my younger brother has rebelled against me, and has entered Muhazu, and he has given over his 2 hands to the leader of the Apiru. And since, there's a break in the tablet there, so we've lost a name, is at war with me, take care of your land. And what responses do these governors in Canaanite cities get from the pharaoh? Nothing. Their pleas, and those of others like them, go unanswered. No archers, no chariots, not even a reply. And little by little, Canaan is lost by the Egyptians. Now let's review what we've seen. Ahmosis I drives out the Hyksos from the Nile Delta region, ending some 300 years of a divided Egypt. The Egyptians re-establish themselves in the north, with new cities, a palace complex at Ramesses, military forts, and a major push to take control of Canaan. For 100 years, pharaoh after pharaoh pursues and maintains that control. Then something happens. Thutmose IV dies young, under mysterious circumstances. His ancestors had enjoyed long life and long reigns, but his is cut short somehow. The city of Ramses and its palaces are abandoned, and over the next several decades, the pharaoh Amenhotep III turns his back on Canaan, ignoring pleas for help as the whole region slips away. We read the forlorn reports of various Canaanite governors that a people called the Apiru are taking over town after town. What has happened here? 100 years of determined Egyptian strategic policy are suddenly abandoned. As we look at the overall sweep of Egyptian history, there is a huge break in the mid-1400s, a swing away from power, confidence, and expansion to a loss of nerve and retreat. What happened? We may look at the traditional date of 1446 for an answer. The Exodus happened. The blow to Egypt's military, its economy, and its confidence can be seen right there. There's another very interesting element here, as we can see when we look again at the timing of events. Remember what Stephen Collins wrote about this? Self-indulgent and surrounded by riches, Amenhotep III ruled for 38 years, but all the while Egypt's control over Canaan and Syria dwindled to nothing. This is the period on our timeline right after the date of the Exodus, Egypt's loss of nerve and loss of Canaan. What was happening with Israel during that time? Right after receiving the law at Mount Sinai and believing the spies' bad report about Canaan, they were spending 40 years wandering in the wilderness. What would have happened if they had listened to the urging of Caleb and Joshua when they returned from spying out the land and moved right away to take Canaan? They would have encountered Egyptian garrisons and governors in every major city, and the conquest of Canaan would have been much harder. But 40 years later, when they do enter Canaan under Joshua, we are told about the enemies they meet: Ammonites, Hittites, Edomites, Moabites, and more. But what we do not hear about are Egyptians. In that 40 years, they have pulled out one by one. We might be reminded of how Scripture teaches that God knows the future and can even use our disobedience to meet His purposes. And so it was here. He knew Israel would not obey His instruction to enter Canaan right away. And when the new generation was ready, they found the Egyptian presence had melted away. We call that providence, don't we? So, where has this investigation taken us? We've seen the historical background to the confrontation between Moses and the Pharaoh of the Exodus, probably Thutmose IV. After that terrible series of plagues, Moses stretches out his staff over the sea, and God parts it. The Egyptians pursuing them are lost under the waves. That's what the Bible tells us. Do we have proof now from history and archaeology that the Exodus is solid history? I'd still say no, not proof. But the evidence is piling up. Our confidence in the Bible as history is not misplaced. If you have questions or comments about this lecture, or any others in the Good Answers series, you may direct them to me, Dr. Jerry C. Four, at yahoo.com.